All right, thanks for reminding me. So we got started. We're talking about what is payment analytics. It enhances your auditing practices by giving monitoring transactions and notifying open cases for designated individuals with infractions based on the rules that you create. Here we were just showing how a cardholder runs a transaction. And once the transaction posts, Payment Analytics does 100% automatic monitoring of all transactions using the rules that are set up in the system. It can also create cases for the transaction, and it can set it up so a specified person is then um, able to research and resolve the issue. So here we were talking about Jen. She used her card, and she used it by not, when she used it online. She did not use a physical card. So there's a rule that MJ, her manager, had set up to receive an alert when this occurs. Now, it isn't necessarily that it's wrong or out of policy, but he wants to be aware of those situations. And so that he can then verify online purchases as legitimate. So that's an example of a use of uh, the, um, uh, the payment analytics. So the benefits to you, first of all, you don't need any additional hardware or software. You don't need any additional cost to implement. It is pretty user-friendly, pretty straightforward, doesn't require extensive training. It boosts your program compliance and cost savings, increases efficiency and program control, and of course reduces risk because you're monitoring for fraud or other situations. So there are several functions in here that we are looking at in particular. Here is the first function we're going to talk about is user management. And it's the functionality where the program managers will be setting up the people who'll be using the system. And then you give them roles based on their job responsibilities. So one person would be in charge of user management. You also have rule management, and this is the functionality where program managers set up the rules that align with the organization's spend policies. So these rules will then monitor the transactions. And I always tell everyone, if you're wondering, well, what kind of rules would we need? Think of any issues you've had in the past. Maybe talk to your finance people and find out if there's been any fraud situations or things that you can maybe set up rules to prevent in the future. That's a good place to get started when you're trying to figure this out. And then, of course, the last piece here is case management. And that gives you the functionality to keep track of your information. You've got tools and you can audit and disposition all of the transactions. So we're going to take a look at all of this. And but first, we're going to start out with simply how to log into the system. So let's jump into that. And you can see here, this is the welcome to Access Online. When you are in Access Online, you will find Payment Analytics over here on the left in the drop-down menu. And you can see it's down below Home with Email Center, Training, etc. So this will always be on pretty much every page. And all you have to do is click on Payment Analytics, and then you'll get the welcome screen for Payment Analytics. Within here, you have three simple sections: case, rule, and user management, which we just kind of touched base on those. As we go through this, we will be starting at the bottom, user management, working our way up to case management. So we'll start down here. All right, you also here, you can see messages about the system. So if you get a message, you can just click the message link, and then you can read whatever is going on so that you can be up to date on what's going on with the system. You don't get a confirmation message before you delete it. So if you do decide to delete a message, just keep that in mind. Notice in the left navigation pane, there are links, as I mentioned, to case management, rule management, and user management. So this is where we're going to be spending our time. Let's start with each of the features. We're starting with user management. So again, we're at the welcome page. We click on user management. And here you can see is the user management summary. Someone have a question? No? Okay. The manage user summary screen will appear showing all users that are in the system. To create a new user, you just click on enroll a user over here in the corner. And when you click on that, you will get this little form. And so first you need to select the organizational short name if it doesn't pre-populate. And it will display as a default without you having to select it if you only have one. But if you have multiple org names, then you would have to put it in. And a user must be set up in Access Online before they can be brought into Payment Analytics. So we're relying on the Access Online information to pull into here as much as possible. So here's where you would enter for Payment Analytics the user ID or the Access Online user ID, which will also be the Payment Analytics user ID. So they're closely linked. So once you enter that information, you click Continue, and you're going to get a form like this that basically is saying, what kind of role do you want this person to have? Well, first you want to look and see if their status is active. Okay, so you want to make sure that they're active in the system. And then down here, you need to just click which ones you want them to have. So first of all, if we look at case managers, that if you have that role, you can view and manage cases. You have to have the case assigned to them. So when the case is dispositioned, it is assigned to a particular case manager. The other role, program auditor, that is a view-only role. And they can view cases and rules, but they can't create or edit them. So they're coming in usually as a third-party kind of thing, or a separate from your group kind of thing. And then program managers, they have the read-write access to cases and rules, but they can't manage users. I'm sorry, and they can manage users, but they can't create users, okay? And we've got user admins that can create and manage users. So the user admins go in and set everything up, and then everyone else can then work with the information within it. Once you have selected, you just click Save. And so now you can see here's some users. These are made up, of course, and then these are the roles that they were given and whether or not their status is active. And of course, you can continue to enroll more. Now that we have some in here, you have the Manage User option. So if you click on Manage User, then you'll have a list of user ID. So let's say I have an approving official out on maternity leave, and she'll be out for 12 weeks. And I can go in and change her status in Payment Analytics to inactive. That way she wouldn't need to go through and see all of the alerts when she comes back. Like you to note that making her inactive in Payment Analytics will not change her status in Access Online and vice versa. The status must be updated in both Access Online and Payment Analytics. To edit an existing user ID, you just click on the Manage User, and then you select the link to the ID you want to edit. If you have multiple users in Payment Analytics, you can filter your search by clicking the plus and minus icons, and also search by name, user ID, role, or status. So you can search by these different items here. So any questions here?
I have a question.
Sure.
As program administrators, are we already set up and enrolled for this, or do we need to enroll ourselves?
These are for the implementation side to get started. This is a feature that has to be turned on. So I don't know if it's turned on for you or not. I assume it is, since we're having the learning. So it would be turned on. And once it's turned on, then you need to go in, and the program manager needs to set, or I'm sorry, the user administrator needs to view and manage additional users. So I don't know if you need special FEGs. I'm struggling with that a little bit, other than what's in here. It should be just automatically available to you, but you can't do anything in it unless your ID has been set up in Payment Analytics. Does that make sense? No?
Yeah, I think so. I'll go in and look and play with it and see.
Yeah. I have to check with implementation. I haven't thought about the first time you go in. How do you get in there? But you'll have the link, and you'll go in and you log in with your same ID. So if you have an ID in Access Online, you should be able to also get set up in here. And then once you're set up, then you can get at the rules and things like that. So,
hey, Lori, it's Jack.
yes.
I'm the relationship manager on the program. And maybe you can answer the question a little bit better like this. My first question, are you a program administrator for your piece of business already?
Yes, I am.
So you would act, if you're set up as a PA from the initial part of the implementation, then you going in would give you access to that. If you, in another case scenario would be if you're looking to have access for it and you're not a program administrator, let's say somebody that works underneath you, they would have to reach back to you to give you the access to allow them to have that kind of access to this particular product in analytics. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I did just go and log in to Access Online just to see what I see, and I do not see a link for payment analytics, so I assume that means that I am not set up. So should I just I'll just contact Michelle Garcia about that.
You answered your question exactly right. You'd reach out to Michelle to have her access that for you.
Thank you.
You're
Terry,
welcome.
this is Tina. I don't have access to that either. So I don't know if any other people on, the training has access, or if it's just a few of us that do not have the access to this.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
This is Michelle Garcia. I'm honestly, I thought that when we initially set up all of our PAs that they should have had access to everything. I mean, I was told how to get them set up. Well, actually, US Bank set up a good amount of these PAs,
Right.
and then the rest of them I did the form, and so I'm a little confused as to why they don't automatically have access to this. So what is it
Do
that
this,
we're missing
Michelle.
that we need to do?
I'll reach out to Mike and talk to him about that.
Okay.
And do a follow-up. But my understanding is then because just confirm with me, Michelle, you've accessed this, you've looked at it because you're set up as the overall program administrator, correct?
This is the first time I'm barely just trying to follow along now to get in there and look at it. But yeah, it looks like when I get in there, and now that I've found it, I see user management under payment analytics, and looks like there's only like six of us that have access to it, and I'm not sure why, because I would think all of my PAs should have access to this.
I would agree. I'll reach back to Mike.
Okay.
I think at the initiation of this, it was the primary folks like yourself that would have access to it, and then if you wanted someone else to have access, you could allow them to have access going through you. But I'll confirm with Mike.
Okay, yeah, and that's fine, and I can kind of follow up with him too to find out if there's something I need to do on my end. But yeah, I mean, that was sort of the whole purpose, I believe, of the training and stuff is, for all of my PAs. I mean, it's kind of pointless if they don't have access.
No, we'll get it figured out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Lori.
No problem. All right, so here you can see we've selected the role of case manager and program manager for this particular person, and we could have changed it, make whatever changes, because we're in modify or manage user. And once we're done with that, we would click save. So at this point, we do ask people to think about it, and you maybe already have, but in your organization, who would be involved in payment analytics process? And so obviously you already know a few people don't have it that should. And then what role should each of those each person have? So think about that a little bit. We'll be talking more about the activities and things that occur, but just some food for thought as we move along. Okay, so let's talk about rule management. Once you have everyone in there, the next thing is to set up the rules. And rules are set up pretty simply. You select a template. We have a set of existing templates that you can select from. And so, for example, you can select a transactions maybe at prohibited merchant category codes, or monitor transactions that occur on the weekend, those kinds of things. After you do that, you need to set the rule parameters. And at this point, you're identifying the available parameters that fit your rules and your organization's specific methods. So for example, if you create a rule to track transactions at a prohibited MCC, you can include specific MCC codes and then select, maybe you can also adjust it, and you can have one that looks at all, but then maybe you only have, you can have another one of the same template, but a secondary rule that says I only want to track these kinds of transactions if they're over $500. Or monitor on the weekend, those kinds of things. So you can adjust. So the templates can be used for multiple things. They aren't just, for one thing only. You can adjust the parameters, kind of like a report. You're always adjusting it to get different data. Then you need to save your rule statement. So this portion of the rule creation, you basically specify the name, give it a description. We also have a severity, which again, most groups really think of that as risk level. So how high of a risk is it to the organization? It might have a higher or lower, so you have to get together with your group and decide, this is our way of signaling these. We want to make a 3 a high and a 1 a low, whatever the case may be. So, and then, so now you would create a case with every transaction flagged by a rule, and then you'd also assign a case owner. So when you're finished with setting up your rule statements, you have a completed rule that you can customize to meet your needs. Now, rule templates aren't exciting or anything like that, but we currently have 32 of them. And you can use them to set up multiple variations, which I already mentioned. So each template has a description to the right of the template name. And for those of you who have downloaded the presentation, the last few slides at the end, there's an appendix with all of the rule management templates listed there. They're also online, but I wanted you guys to have them so you could see them as well. So basically you click the link of the template you want to use, and then you go in and set your parameters. So we're going to look at some scenarios, because just reading and talking parameters is not too terribly fun. So we're on the next page here. I'm going to read the scenario, and then I'm going to ask you to speak up and identify which template would be the most appropriate. Sometimes there's more than one, but whatever templates you think would be appropriate to help monitor for this situation. So we have Jen. She has to purchase office supplies. She has a single purchase limit of 1,000. And while a desk and chair are good, she also needs a monitor, headphones, and a desk lamp. She wants to be careful that it isn't declined, so she spends $880 for her desk and chair at one office supply store, and then travels across town to get the rest of the items at a different office supply store, spending another $515. So if you would look at these, we have merchant watch list, non-standard purchase items, purchase split, a couple of those. So take a look at those and vote for the one you think is most appropriate for this situation. And that would be verbal votes. Which one?
It's the third one.
Purchase split across multiple merchants with the same MCC. All right, let's see. Yep, you got that one right. This provides notification when separate transactions occur on the same date at the same MCC, but at different locations. And you can see the one below is for when it's at the same location. So you have a similar choice there. All right, scenario number 2. This is Mason. And again, office supplies. He needs to get them for the whole department. And the organization has a Offices Are Us special prices that they've negotiated for throughout the year, and that is their preferred supplier. While the others aren't blocked, that is their preferred supplier. So you want to monitor to make sure he is using Offices Are Us and not a different merchant. So which of these would fit this situation?
Second one?
Good one. Yes, it's outside a non-preferred supplier. So notice this isn't a declined or rejected supplier, because that would be taken care of at swipe time. You would have your codes, I assume, in place so that when they swipe their card, it would decline. This is after the card is swiped, and so this is information that did already get by the authorization process. So it was non-preferred, but not a blocked supplier. All right, let's try another one. This is Ben. He used his card on Thanksgiving and made some online purchases. And Ben's manager is wondering, is he doing his holiday shopping or is he, taking advantage of Black Friday deals, or as we would say nowadays, Cyber Monday deals, I'm sure. So which of these templates might impact or support catching this and sending notifications? And there might be more than one. Which one?
The first one.
Actually, it's weekend or holiday purchase or holiday purchases. This is a good one as well, but this is actually looking at the weekend or holiday purchase. Now, the reason we suggest both weekend or holiday would, take care of both holidays and weekends, but holidays can occur not on the weekend. So there's a couple of them here that you could use to kind of monitor when people are making weekend or after work purchases. All right, here we have Mai. This is the last one, I promise. Here we have Mai, and she travels a lot for her job and needs to charge hotel and flights to her card. She has $1,000 single purchase limit, and you want to monitor her travel expenses to prevent Mai from being stranded. You aren't looking to. Yeah. Sorry, could you go on mute, please? You want to monitor her expenses to prevent her from being stranded by, trying to pay for a bill and then, of course, having it declined because it's over $1,000. So which of these templates might help you manage this situation?
The first one.
All right, correct. This one allows the user to set an alert notification that's generated when they've made a single purchase that's close to their limit. And so if you know that, she's in a situation where she's going to need, be able to have a larger limit, you can keep an eye on that and see what those items are. And the travel card purchase in a cardholder's zip code, I thought, well, what's that about? But when you think about it, if someone's traveling, they aren't purchasing in their neighborhood. It's always somewhere else. So that's a good one to see if people are using their card locally. All right, so
I'm sorry to interrupt. May I ask a quick question about these? It just sends an alert. It doesn't prevent the card from processing the transaction, right?
Correct. That is taken care of at the authorization as it's at the swipe level. This is at the posting level. So this is after it's posted.
Alrighty, thank you.
You're welcome. So here are some other popular rule templates that a lot of people use. If a large spend increase over the average spend, all of a sudden they're spending a lot more than normal. That's kind of an alert. Let's see, the large spend increase over average, it does, when the total spend during the last close cycle exceeds the average spend of the previous 6 cycles, and that's specified by percentage. So it looks back for some history here too. We have excessive cash withdrawals, so you can get notified if there's been a lot of those, or excessive use of convenience checks. And of course, sales tax transaction with tax information alert. So this template allows the user to set a notification to generate when a transaction contains tax data passed by the merchant. And this template only applies to U.S. sales tax, by the way. All right, so are there any rules to monitor accounts instead of just transactions? And yes, we do. There are some templates that are not transaction based. First, we have the account opened or maintained, exceeding cash withdrawals and limits. So when someone's setting up an account, if they're giving them higher limits than is normal for policy, you would be notified of that. It isn't going to stop them, but you would be aware of it occurring if you chose that template. And so here we have one: account opened and maintained with credit limit exceeding the standard limit, or single purchase exceeding standard limit. And then the bottom to monitor account balances. So it gives you a means to proactively monitor the accounts. So they're the account balance monitor and the account credit limit monitor. So we have lots. Templates that require detailed data from merchants. These templates require some information from the merchant themselves. They must pass through enough detailed data, level 2 and level 3, so that the system can search for the transaction detail against your rule parameters. So for example, if a hotel does not pass room rate information, we cannot monitor that hotel's transactions against your daily rate parameter. The merchant does determine what level of data they pass to us. So for some rule templates to be effective, you may need to contact applicable merchants and have an agreement in place that they will pass certain levels of data through when posting transactions. The non-standard items purchase rule template is an excellent one because you can enter a keyword of what types of purchases you want to monitor. So for example, gift cards, which are a type of item that may be out of policy for your program. All right, so now that we have a good understanding of how rules work, let's look at how to set them up in payment analytics. To create or modify rules.
Before you go on, I have a question.
Yes.
So on the previous slide, you talked about the level of detail from a merchant.
Correct.
Typically, the merchants get charged based on how they submit their payments. So I don't see us having a lot of ability to convince a merchant that we want to see more detail on a credit card transaction. Would that be correct?
Jack, could you help with this one? Oh, Jack must have had to step away. I have not been involved in it myself, but there are situations where I know that people have contacted their merchants and just asked for a certain level of data to be passed through. And I don't know if that requires an official document or not. Jack, are you back?
I am. I'm sorry. Hard to get off mute. Could you repeat the question again real quickly for me, please?
So my understanding was typically a vendor gets charged potentially more in credit card fees to provide more detail. That's why most vendors don't provide that detail. I know currently, like I believe Amazon gives us some, maybe Office Depot gives us that line detail, Granger, some of those, but most vendors do not. So is it really possible to contact a vendor and say, hey, I want to see more detail? Because my feeling is that they're not going to provide that based on their own financial scenario.
So it's a great question, and I'll address it. So what takes place at the vendor site? So they, depending on how they're set up with their merchant bank, so and I'll use U.S. Bank as the example. So if they belong a part of a merchant services, U.S. Bank provider, they can go in and say, I just want to have a simple setup for my transaction and provide level 1, level 2 data. I think what you're talking about when you have more robust information that's necessary is you're looking at level 3 data, which is then provided via the transmission, right? So if that's really up to the vendor and their merchant bank to make that decision. So one thing that can take place, and this is really via Visa, a couple years back did a big initiative to get more of their vendors on level 3. And to your point, because it costs them extra to have that kind of capability. So what we recommend doing, if you find a vendor that is not passing the data, and they may claim to be level 2 or level 3 data, and you're not seeing it, you can reach back to us, and we can reach back to Visa to find out what's taking place with that particular vendor to see what they can do and or if they can upgrade to provide that data. But again, that's up to the vendor and their merchant services that they're processing their transactions through. Does that help?
Yeah, that's kind of what I assumed, because I thought that the level 3 detail did cost a merchant more in credit card fees, and that's why you typically don't see it. It's nice to have it, but you typically don't see that on your transactions. So looking at this slide, I thought, oh, maybe there's something I'm missing that we can actually ask the vendors to do that, but I'm still thinking they probably aren't going to be open to that because of those fees.
And that's a really good point. And I think sometimes you're a big piece of business, if you're doing a lot of business with a particular vendor, it doesn't hurt to ask them if you're on the phone and says, we need level 3 data. And if there's a situation that they can do that and work with their merchant services, absolutely, they may make the move to do it. Especially if you're processing lots of high dollar transactions, you need the detail. It does not hurt to ask, but don't hesitate to reach back to us and say, is there anything we can do via Visa to maybe help this particular vendor along to maybe pass level 3.
Okay, thank you, Jack.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jack. All right, so let's get in and look at how to set up a rule. Well, before I go on, are there any other questions? All right. So we're going to look at rule management. So click on rule management and you're going to see this form. And here you have two options. You have new and manage. So this is obviously for existing. This is for new. When you set up a rule, you first, of course, want to set up a rule name. An asterisk is our wildcard option here. You can set up the rule status, severity, and case owner. Actually, I misspeak. This is the search area. So you're putting in filters. If you have a lot of rules, you're putting in filters to help you find the rule that you want. So if you know the name, it'll take you right to it. If not, you can sort by other options such as case owner. And you can reset the filters whenever. And then once you apply the filters, you would then be able to sort with what's existing. But we're going to first take a look at new. So here is the list of templates. And again, you have it at the end of your presentation. And so these are all the different items that we can use. You just click on the template name for the rule you want to create. Here we have the create new rule screen, and the template we selected was transaction and prohibited MCC. And you can see there's a little description here so you know what you're working with. Here you're going to add your hierarchy positions. Excuse me. So starting at the top section, we'll add the hierarchy position for this account. And you can click the add button and the hierarchy account will populate over to the right for the rule and hierarchy accounts position. So you can add as many hierarchies as you want. You'll want to note that the account field is actually a subset of the hierarchy field. So this field down here is a subset of the field above it. And so if you want to specify certain accounts within that hierarchy, you can enter the account numbers. You can monitor specific accounts if you want. You cannot search in payment analytics for hierarchy or account numbers, however. So if you do not know them, you need to go back to Access Online, do a search to obtain them, and then come back and then you enter them in payment analytics. Also, you can only specify hierarchies in payment analytics that you already have access to in Access Online. So for this particular rule template, we'll set the upper dollar limit amount. So any transaction where the amount exceeds what we enter will be flagged by the system. Now, if you want to, you can enter $0 here, and that will monitor all transactions at the prohibited merchant category codes. Some people don't want to look at transactions under $100, etc. So you can set that to whatever fits. So when we enter the prohibited merchant category codes, the good news here is that there is a button that you can search for the codes and select from a list. We do have the codes up here. So you can go ahead and do that. So you want to put in $0 or more, add your codes. For the MCC codes, you don't. Now, obviously, you have your search and add and remove, so you can work with that till it says what you want. Then you can enter the email recipients just by typing the email address and clicking the add button. You can also select your preferred language between American English and Canadian French. And then be sure to include emails for all recipients, including yourself, if you want to receive the emails when a transgression of this rule occurs. All right. So here, we're back on the payment analytics screen for setting up a rule. The last section is to save your rule statement. So first, of course, you got to give the rule a name and description. You need to be specifically descriptive because you may use the same rule template to set up multiple variations of the rules. So be specific in what you're calling it. And of course, I always say, work with whoever else will be working with this so that you're using a similar naming convention. So for example, you can use transactions that are prohibited MCC to monitor all accounts in a single hierarchy and then have their email just sent to you as a program manager. Or you could set up another one to monitor an account of a cardholder and have the email sent to you as a program manager or to the person who would be supervising that cardholder. So that's why it's important to be specific in the name and description. The next area, we have the severity as low, medium, or high status. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of organizations use this to indicate the risk level of the case, what risk it poses to the organization. The rule status defaults as active when you first set it up. If you don't want it to be active right away, then make sure you click inactive here. And then for case action, the default is new case. If a case action is set to new case and there is at least one email recipient, then both a case and an email will generate. If a case action is set to new case and no email recipient is listed, then only a case will be generated. If the case action is set to no case and there is at least one email recipient, only an email alert will be sent. So once the email is sent, the incident is deleted and will not appear in any reports. If the case action is set to no case and no email recipient is listed, or no email is sent and no case is created, this wouldn't capture any of the transactions, and that it wouldn't be recording anything from the rule. So when you're done setting the parameter, click Save Rule. So once you have set up a rule, you will see a delete button. It doesn't appear now until you set it up, but it will appear here in the lower part so that you can delete the rule if needed. All right, so your new rule will be listed in your rules management list. To maintain a rule that already exists on the left navigation pane, we click Rule Management and, of course, Manage. And at this point, you could eventually have a long list. So you use the search function at the top to find, by whatever parameter you prefer, find the one you need. And once you apply filters, the list at the bottom of the page will match to the criteria at the top in your search area. When you've located the rule you want to maintain or change, just click on the name. The rule opens, and you can modify the parameters or delete the rule in the same manner as when you set it up. And again, a delete button will appear at the bottom of the rule, or the rule parameter page. So what questions do you have about setting up and maintaining rules?
Yes, I've got a question. You talk about the prohibited MCC transactions.
Yeah, that's the
Won't
one.
those just
selected.
decline? And so we don't need to set, I mean, doesn't that just automatically decline if the MCC is prohibited, or if the transaction is limited to, say, $1,000, doesn't the transaction just decline?
Correct. It should. If you've got it set up to do that during authentication, then yes, it wouldn't even make it to the posting.
So, I mean, we really wouldn't need to set that up in this list of rules for reports or anything about the transactions if they're declining, or will it show attempts to use those?
You're correct. You're correct. It may not be a rule that applies for you. Not everyone uses the same features. So if you're using the features for, having the MCC sorted at the time of swipe, then this rule probably wouldn't apply.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the system is controlling it like I thought. Thank you.
Correct. All right. So this is an example of a notification email. And the system will send one email per rule. So if a rule has multiple incidents, so it hits 3 or 4 situations, then Payment Analytics will send one email containing all the incidents. If 2 rules trigger, then the recipient will get 2 separate emails with all of the incidents in each of those emails. So you'll get one email per rule and the multiple incidents will be included in. In regards to alerts, while you can send the email to anyone with an email address, it isn't recommended to send them to cardholders. Each rule would have to be set up individually per cardholder in order to just contain the cardholder's information. So if you want to send the cardholder an alert, we recommend the alert be forwarded to the cardholder as part of the case management process rather than set up here. And if you set up a rule and find you're getting many emails or many transactions flagged, take a look at the rule parameters and see if it's tracking what you really need it to, and then make any adjustments as needed. So you may already be thinking about which rule could be effective. You've already figured out that one wouldn't apply to you that we chose for this one. But consider taking a few minutes after this session and make some more notes about the potential rules and parameters. And again, you know, my biggest point is if you have any fraud concerns, this is where you can really set something up to help you catch them as they occur. All right, any questions before we move into case management?
I just have a comment. Your volume really changed a few slides ago. It's really kind of hard to hear you now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me take a look. Get out of this to get to my audio. Is that better?
No, it's still really low.
How about that? This is at 100%, so I don't know if I can go any higher. Wonder why it wouldn't. I don't have a setting on my headsets themselves.
Just cleared up just now, whatever you did.
Oh, well, it was magic. So you can hear me all right. All right, let me know if I fade out again, and I'll putz with it. I maybe need a new headset, maybe have a loose wire. All right, let's go back to the presentation. And let's make it big so you can see everything. And here we have case management. So let's talk about case management. So case management functionality allows you to create cases both for follow-up investigation as well as to work with or manage existing situations. So when you set up a rule to create a case, anytime a transaction is flagged by the rule, the system will create a case. So there's the catch. If you set it up to create a case automatically, it will do that. If you don't, it won't. Okay, so if you don't want to go through a tracking, you don't feel this is a rule that you maybe want to know about, but you don't want to create a case and do a whole follow-up thing on, you can select to do that as well. At the same time, you can assign a case manager to handle all of the cases that result from that particular rule. And you can also go into the case and assign it to a different owner. So maybe you decide you need to forward it to the cardholder's manager for further examination. The case manager then is the one working to resolve the case. So they can add notes to the cases based on research. In addition, they're able to set current status of the case. Is it pending, etc. And sort the cases by rule name, the date opened, and last updated. And finally, within a case, case managers can assign a classification depending on the outcome of the case as well as a disposition. By creating and associating cases, you can detect relationships between transactions over time and move from a reactive to a proactive control framework. So let's see what this will look like. You view the cases by, of course, clicking on case management. And notice on the left nav, there are two links, My Cases and All Cases. When you click My Cases, the cases assigned to you will populate on the page. If you click All Cases, you will see everything. Notice at the top of the page, there is a plus sign next to the filter cases, so you can expand a panel, and that'll give you some search options for cases by case ID, rule name, owner, etc. A date opened range as well. So this is helpful if you have many cases. The table of cases shows the case ID, rule name, etc. You can see it across there. The column headers can be clicked to sort the list by that column. So for example, looking at all cases, you can quickly see how many cases are assigned to a particular case owner and help manage workload. You can also sort by rule name to see how many transactions were flagged by that rule. Or you can sort by account name if you to see if you have a particular account holder who is a repeat offender. For case statuses, there are 3: open, closed, and pending. Here they're all open on this screen. To open case details, click on the case ID over here on the left, and then that will open. And here you can see the case details screen. The information appears showing the cardholder's name, transaction date, amount, and merchant location. And then for this case, we have Sue Black that had 4 transactions on August 16th that totaled more than her $1,000 single transaction limit. These could very well be legitimate charges, or they might not be. Because we set up a rule to watch for that, a case has been opened, and the case owner can now reach out to the cardholder to get more information. So let's say that I am the case owner. I can use the drop-down menu to switch the case to a different case owner if it's, someone else is more appropriate for dealing with this situation. So you can switch, you can move the cases around as needed. For the case severity here, you can see this is the second one here. You can select low, medium, or high. Some organizations, again, use this for level of risk. So let's say Sue called us back and explained the situation, and she'd stayed at a hotel for a week, had 2 different rates, ordered room service, ate in the hotel, resulting in 4 different charges. So I can now change the severity to low, in my opinion, on this case. Now, there are menus that can be customized here. There is an ability to customize the list that display in some of the drop-down menus. So if you really need something changed, work with Jack to identify if this is something your organization needs. After the case manager has researched the transaction, they can then disposition the case. So over here, you can see it says fraud. And on the screen, you can see fraud. However, this disposition can be changed. Maybe you want to call it a policy violation or undetermined, or maybe set it as a valid transaction. Again, note here that dispositioning this case as fraud does not report the transaction as fraud. So this is your auditing and you're managing the situations, but if it is a fraud, you do need to go through regular fraud process and access online. So that you need to maybe, if you want to, you can, the transaction management class should teach you how to manage that. Dispositions the case as fraud in payment analytics only for tracking and reporting purposes. Okay. So no, again, this disposition field can be customized to your organization's need. So in Sue's case, I would disposition it as a valid use of the card. And the case status is open. Of course, we can close it, but you can also select a classification for the case. So in Sue's case, I would select not applicable. There's also a section for comments. So at that point, I could enter Sue's explanation down here in the comments section. Oops. Here, case status is open. Pending is another status to indicate how you're working on cases. So some organizations change the pending status to know that someone started on the case and is actively working it, and then select closed once it's finished. So after researching Sue's case, I would select close, save it, and I am done. You always want to click save after you've updated your case. Any change that's made on the case details page is documented to the case history. To view case history, you have the case history button over here on the bottom. You also can print the case and print the details here if you want to or need to. So here's an example of a case printout. And so you can use, it's Adobe PDF, so you can use those controls to save or print the files. What questions do you have about case management? All right, back to our action planning. At this point, let's think about what would be the best way for setting up the assigning cases and defining the case management process in your organization. So knowing how this works now, how does it work with how to adapt your processes to fit this payment analytics. So we have some reporting that you're probably going to be interested in. And as you can see, there are 2 reports. They show up when you are in case management, but you have to click on all cases. If you click on my cases, those reports are not available because they're summary reports of everything. So if you click on all cases, you'll see the rule summary report and the case management details. You can use the filter cases functionality to select what displays on this page and on the report. So you can filter using the headers there. They can plus sign next to filter cases, and that expands the screen. One thing to note is if the filter you use ends up returning more than 30,000 records, the case management detail report button will be grayed out and you won't be able to run it. And that is just because there's so many. So you would need to maybe change your search parameters to reduce the level of return, and then you can run your case. So let's click on the rule summary report button. That's the first one here. And this is an example of the rule summary report. It provides information about the number of cases and number of accounts you have created in your system. So let's say you have 15 cases for transactions close to the purchase limit, and it affected 15 accounts. You know, perhaps the search or the solution is to look at your policies, and maybe we need to make some adjustments for inflation, etc. This does happen over time. Another example could be the weekend and holiday purchase. If there were 5 cases and only 1 account was impacted, at that point, you might want to think, all right, now I need to have a conversation with that particular card holder. It's a small but powerful report. Do I need to address it in general, or do I need to address it to a specific person? So it kind of gives you a feel for how things are going. This is an example of the case management details report. That was the second one available. The report provides details on cases, owners, severity, disposition, account numbers, names, and date and time. The report will populate in a browser. So this will be what we call active reporting, which is a feature we have in our various reporting options. And to use active reporting features, you just click the arrow button on one of the columns. You can see over here, it's already done. And you can see you have a number of things. You can create charts, you can hide columns, you can go ahead and do a pivot table. So you can do a lot of the fancy footwork here, similar to Excel, of course, not as robust as Excel, but this is available, you know, live right in your browser at the time. So not everything has active reporting, but this one does. So it makes it handy. Create a line graph to see when most cases occur, to see your trends or patterns. Cases do stay in the system for 2 years. So it's recommended if you want to save long-term reports and case histories, you may need to set up something and download it into a place on your computers, etc., to store it long-term. So let's summarize some of the ideas we covered today. The rules, they're highly flexible. And although the system uses templates, they're not a one-size-fits-all generic. The parameters you enter customize that rule, limiting the output to only what's useful to you. Rules can be changed on the fly if they're returning too much or too little data. And they can also be limited to specific hierarchies or accounts if you have certain situations you need to monitor. Alerts and cases. Notification and case manage options are very flexible too. We talked about sending notifications to any individual that you designate. All you have to do is enter their email address. Cases can be managed by any individual that has been set up as a user ID and access online, and is also set up as such in payment analytics. So they have to have that role. And payment analytics works in a complementary fashion with other data mining tools. So it'll help enhance the overall security of your card program. So before we go and explore the training area of our reports, is there any questions about anything we've covered so far? All right. So here's our web-based training. I strongly suspect you've hit a couple training classes and have already seen this, but when you go in, this is where you can find your e-learning for working with Access Online and also with payment analytics. You can see our payment analytics e-learning is right here. This is an e-learning lesson under work with payments. So that's where you would go to find that. We also have user guides, videos, quick references, and recorded classes. And if you want, we have some certification tests that apply only to the lessons. So at this point, user guides, I always recommend people to look at those if they want the nitty-gritty details of everything. And videos, I don't know that we have any videos for payment analytics, but they're short and sweet, just a couple minutes, maybe 3 max. Quick references give you something you can print out and set next to your desk or on your desk so that you can walk through a new process as needed. Make sure you select your user type as a commercial administrator or card holder. We do have the search option, so you could just type payment analytics and do a search and get a list of whatever's available. And then here's announcements down here letting you know when new things have come through. So we've explained what payment analytics is. We've identified the benefits. We've showed you how to set up and maintain users and create rules and locate and manage cases, as well as run reports and find your resources. What other questions do you have about payment analytics?
I have a question about the rules.
Yes.
The holiday and weekend one. If someone were to make a purchase like on a Thursday but didn't post until Saturday, would that still trigger an alert?
To my understanding, it should. Well, that's if you have the holiday one, not the weekend. If the holiday occurs during the week, you're going to want to use the holiday one. Does that make sense?
Okay, so yeah, I'm trying to figure out if it's based on when the transaction happened or when it's posted, because I know sometimes, we'll get things that say that was posted on a weekend, but they had actually made the transaction during the week. It just took a few days for it to post.
That can happen. I think it identifies the date of the transaction, even though you don't see the information until after it posts. I think it goes on the date the transaction occurs.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, well, I'm going to stop the recording for this session. And I want to thank everyone for your time.